everyone, Logan Clements here, freelance event producer, and today I'm so excited to bring you another installment of my favorite tips and tricks when it comes to event planning and running your own business. This week we're going to try something a little bit different. I know normally with my videos I feel like they tend to go in that 12-13 minute range, so today I'm going to attempt to keep it short. This week we're going to tackle speakers. We're not going to actually tackle speakers, but we're going to talk about virtual event speakers. We'll just focus on how you as a virtual event organizer should approach your virtual speakers ahead of your next virtual event. Before we get into it, I do want to remind you to comment below, turn on that little bell button to subscribe to my videos. I drop new ones every single Monday, and let's get back into it because we're keeping it short and sweet today. All right, so you're a virtual event organizer or you're looking to host a virtual event and you are just getting started. So maybe you haven't asked any speakers at all. You're still trying to think of what your event wants to look like. And the best thing I would recommend is honestly to map it all out. Now, I'll link below. I did have another video where I talked about why you need a plan for your virtual events, a run of show, I call it, an ROS. This is telling you what happens minute by minute by minute. I found this super helpful for people just to actually map out what they're thinking. So if you're thinking of having several speakers and a panel and some Q&A, put times on it and actually map it out so you can see just how long some of that stuff takes. And if you start looking at it and you just reading it feels like it feels long, that's where you're gonna have to need to cut it down. But I find when you actually map it out, you start to see, oh, I have 3 slots for keynote speakers or remarks. I have panelist slots. I have a closing remarks slot. And this starts to get you a feel for exactly who you want to ask to be a part of your virtual event. I found this kind of strategy is very helpful to guide you in that process versus if you're part of a committee who's planning an event that you all just start saying, we'd love anyone to speak. And you ask a bunch of people and then all of a sudden, you have a great problem, but you have now 15 people who said yes to speaking. But when you map it all out, that's actually turning into a 3-hour event. So the more intentional you can be with figuring out where you want speakers, the better you can be with your asks. Now, the next thing to think about when it comes to asking speakers is you as the event organizer, do you want your entire event to be live? Do you want it to be entirely pre-recorded? Do you want it to be a mixture of live and pre-recorded? And so when you think about this process, because when it's live, there's just a lot of things that could happen day of that you can't control. Can't control Wi-Fi going out or a storm coming. The more you pre-record, the more you can control some of the content on the day of. Now you can also record it and make it look like it's live. You can just record it and acknowledge that it's not live. But thinking about what you'd want live versus pre-recorded and maybe what sections you'd be open to either can help you when you're doing that initial outreach to speakers. Because the beauty of virtual events is you can get access to speakers who you never would have been able to have at your events in the past. Maybe they were too expensive, they were too busy, you couldn't fly them into your venue, but now you can have access to them for your virtual event. But you also want to be strategic when you're asking your speakers, do you want them there for so if your event is happening December 3rd, do they have to be available to speak live on December 3rd? Or do you want them to pre-record and say, hey, our event is December 3rd, please attend, but we would love you to send us your remarks pre-recorded ahead of time? Or option 3, are you open to whichever they prefer? This is helpful to have already decided as the organizer before you even ask the speaker, just so that you're helping manage expectations. Because it is different if a speaker says no because they thought they had to be live, or they said yes thinking they would do this live interactive thing and now you're asking them to pre-record. It is another thing that's really fun to have in your back pocket with virtual events is you could ask them to be live, but then you could always have, oh, if they can't make it, sure, let's make it pre-recorded, and that's fine too. And my next point for before you even ask speakers is to think about if they are live or pre-recorded, you are gonna ask them to come to a rehearsal. Rehearsal doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna make them practice everything they're gonna say during your event. Rehearsal could just mean you're gonna help them use the technology that you're gonna use on the day of the event for your virtual streaming platform. For example, whenever I work with speakers and we're using Zoom, we'll do a rehearsal in Zoom so they can just kind of see what it would look like on their end. I know a lot of us are familiar with Zoom, but maybe they don't know how to share things on their screen or where the chat function is. We don't know. And so they need to know that they'll be asked usually for about 30 minutes or an hour in the week ahead or 2 weeks ahead of their event to come in for a rehearsal just to practice. Even if they're pre-recording, they might need a rehearsal to be taught how to record themselves because you can use things like Zoom or iMovie or whatever is working on your computer. So just knowing that they don't just, when they say yes to coming to your event, it doesn't mean that you just need their time on the day of your event. There is going to be some time ahead of that you're going to need them to show up for a virtual rehearsal. Which takes me into my last point. If you do have any live speakers, this is where you want to make sure in that initial ask that they would be available ahead of their actual event speaking time. So for example, say you had a speaker who was supposed to start speaking at noon. Maybe at an in-person event, they could show up probably at like 10 of noon, 5 of noon, 11:55, walk in the door, and they would be fine to start their remarks at noon. With the virtual event world, we're finding that it's better to ask speakers almost 30 minutes ahead of their scheduled time to speak, because I found sometimes that if they're scheduled to speak at 12, maybe it's not until 11:56 they start to think, oh, where was that link I was supposed to use to join? And the more time you have to get ahead of some of the common virtual event snafus, usually it has to do with audio. Maybe their audio isn't clear, or the video isn't clear, or the lighting isn't great. Or you need to teach them how they're supposed to enter your live event. Are they supposed to be muted so we don't hear them before we see them on the screen? Are they gonna have to share slides and now all of a sudden they can't find their slides? By asking them to be there about 30 minutes ahead of time, you're giving yourself that wiggle room to troubleshoot, to do all of those things, because the closer you get to their actual event time of when they arrive, the tighter it's going to be to make sure that they look really, really good before you put them on screen. And I've had at other events where we've had to postpone things, and by being delayed, we put a slide up for 5 minutes while we waited for a panelist to arrive because we couldn't start our 4-person panel without the 4th person. Now it was fine, we were able to roll with the punches and everything, but unfortunately the other 3 panelists who were early, they ended up losing collectively those 5 minutes out of their hour slot for their panel, so it was only a 55-minute panel. Not the end of the world, but something you could have planned ahead for by either knowing that 4th speaker wasn't available until the exact event time, by just scheduling everything later by 5 minutes and saving that panel to have their full 60 minutes. So these are all things you can think about and you want to talk about both as an event organizer. If you have a virtual event planner working with you, talk about it with them and get this all sorted out before you do your initial ask out to speakers. Your speakers will thank you for it. You're helping manage their expectations and have them have a very successful experience working with you for your virtual event. And hopefully that means maybe you could get them to come for your next in-person event whenever we are able to gather again for in-person things. Well, I said I promised I'd keep it short today. That's all I have for you. My name's Logan Clements, freelance event producer, and I'm so excited to share with you another installment of my favorite tips and tricks when it comes to event planning and running your own business. As always, feel free to pop in the comments. Let me know if you found this helpful. Do you like the shorter format? Did you have any other questions you wanted to know about asking speakers for your virtual event? Thank you for your patience. As always, I'm Logan Clements, and it's been another great time talking with you, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye.